Hey everybody, welcome to another Master Replicas lightsaber review. This one is pretty special. This is another foundational entry into the Master Replicas line. Of course, you can see in front of you, this is the Master Replicas Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi lightsaber as first built by Obi-Wan. It's pretty hilarious actually that is actually what's on that plaque. It's not actually just as first built, it's as first built by Obi-Wan, believe it or not. Okay, let's start flipping this bad boy around. So there's a lot of history to this, a lot of interesting stuff. Where to get started? This is one of the rarest and most valuable lightsabers in the line. They only made 500 of these. Now, when they only make 500 of these, you have to ask yourself, why did that happen? Bear in mind, for instance, that when they first released the Star Wars A New Hope Darth Vader limited edition lightsaber, that they made supposedly 7,500 of those. I find that absolutely impossible to believe that they managed to ramp up production to make 7,500 of these lightsabers. I mean, again, these are not cheap resin. I mean, they're aluminum, they're plastic T-tracks. I mean, you have to put them together. This is not just a simple, mold and casting job. It's just insane that they found factories back there 20 plus years ago to do this. And then remember, on top of the 7,500, there were artist proofs. They had to do another 1,000 of the dual signature versions. That's just insane. So they made a ton of those because obviously at the time, it was, I think, the very first officially licensed Darth Vader, lightsaber. I mean, no, maybe Icons. I think Icons might have done it first, but the quality of Icons, the story of that, not so great. So they obviously expected to sell a lot of that, a lot of those, and they ramped up manufacturing accordingly. Why was there only 500 Luke Skywalker version 2 signature editions? Probably because Mark Hamill just didn't want to sign anymore. He was like, I can only sign 500 for you. Maybe, the actors are like, I don't want to sign any more of these. And it was near the end of the line. Why was the Darth Vader Return of the Jedi signature edition 500, but the limited edition went from 1,500 to 500? So those are all, there's reasons, behind the scenes for these limitations. And a lot of it just has to do with viability with business, things like that. So getting back to this, they made 2,500 of the classic Obi-Wan weathered lightsabers. That's what you see in the movie. That's what you see Alec Guinness wielding in Star Wars A New Hope. That's the iconic lightsaber. Remember that in Star Wars A New Hope, there's only 3 lightsabers. There's Obi-Wan's, there's Luke Skywalker's, and then there's Darth Vader's. So, it's instantly recognizable. Very, very iconic. They made 2,500 of those. And then they decided to do this variant or variation of it. And the reason they made only 500 was because this is not considered iconic, okay? This is the quote-unquote clean version. So when they say as first built, the conceit is that what would Obi-Wan Kenobi's lightsaber that we see in Star Wars A New Hope, what would it have looked like as first built, like literally immediately built? And so essentially they just took that and they just completely cleaned it up. They made it bright and shiny. They made it essentially factory fresh, right? That's as first built. And they probably didn't really expect it to sell very many of those because, again, if you are collecting and you want one lightsaber in your collection from Obi-Wan, it's gonna be the screen accurate, weathered prop, okay? And so this was made really for very small niche type of collector back then. Maybe the sort of guy who's a completionist and is going to get every single version out there, one of both in their collection. that's certainly, one possibility. Or maybe for some oddball reason, there's collectors who prefer the as first built over the weathered. But that's, in any case, the reason why I think they only made 500 of these. But because of that, 20 plus years later, this hilt has become one of the most sought after in the entire line because it is, again, so rare. And so getting this is just really difficult. Probably about 10 years ago, these came up for auction quite a bit more. There's one single YouTube video that was made by a guy who was doing it for eBay. He created a video for eBay to sell it. That was years ago. And then there's another gentleman from Germany who sold his earlier this year for about 3,500 and change, complete in box, I want to say. So not very many of these out there at all. The prices tend to skyrocket. So at this point, I would say anything in the $3,000 range would probably be a very, very solid deal, very, very good deal. So let's talk about this particular lightsaber I have in front of me, how I came to have it, and the story behind this one. So I'm going to take the acrylic case off. So you can see that the acrylic case in this instance is a lot smaller. This is literally from the first batch. So here, let me replace this. You can see this is literally from the very, very first batch that Master Replicas was making. This is the same generation as Luke Skywalker from The Empire Strikes Back, same generation as Darth Vader, New Hope. So you can see that the acrylic here is very, very low, very, very narrow, okay? And that it's placed onto the base with the base on the outside. So there's actually an instep, okay? There's not a bevel with the later ones, but an instep. And so we're gonna take this thing off. A lot of people, by the way, really don't like this type of display case, which I can't blame them for. I personally also dislike this. I think it's just too cramped, too low, and I much prefer the higher feet and the larger display cases that they started making, I don't know, about 2005-ish, 6-ish. They did this with the Return of the Jedi, Vaders and Lukes, with all of the Revenge of the Sith. So I would say 2005-6, they just made better bases, the ones with the bevel, taller, bigger acrylic cases. The packaging is a lot better. This did come complete in box for me, but that's kind of like a little bit of a joke because all that meant was it was basically like 2 brown cardboard boxes in a bigger cardboard box. And one box, of course, has the actual case for the lightsaber hilt with the soft foam and the little clasp. And then the other one was just a simple rectangular box with a base at the bottom and then the acrylic on top of it. Very, very easy to have damage, of course, because it just wasn't packaged very thoughtfully, very well. This was Master Replicas in the old days. So there you have it. So number one, the display case, not very good. A lot of people would upgrade these over the years. They would just kind of grab, I guess, another Master Replicas hilt and then use that base and display case instead of this one, and either sell or even throw them away or whatever. So I'm taking the acrylic case off, and then I'm going to put the background on so we can see this lightsaber in all its glory, so to speak. So here we go. All right. Let me see here if I'm doing this correctly so we can actually turn it all the way. Very good. So let's continue moving this around while I tell you the story, and you can actually enjoy sort of the how beautiful this thing is. So anyways, this is from a collector in the United Kingdom. he knew that I was, interested in this. At the time, I felt that the going price for this hilt, as the going price for many very, very highly desirable hilts, would be topping out about low to mid 3,000s. That's kind of been my experience, my expectation. And so, he had some inquiries, and so he, kindly let me know he was putting this on auction. Again, as with the Return of the Jedi Elite Edition, I set my bid. There was a couple of interested parties, and this thing went for like a shocking number. On the day when the bids finally closed, the winning bid was $5,800 US, and that was mind blowing. Of course, I know the seller, so I know he's legit, right? He's not playing games, show bidding, doing none of that stuff. And the reason it went up, actually only 4 people bid on this lightsaber. And, I knew one of them. He's in the United States, another fellow collector in the Portland, Oregon area. And he just put a bid in as like more of like an exploratory bid, just to get an idea for what this was going to be. And I beat him with my bid, but then there were 2 more heavy hitters, I think both from the UK, and they just both put in astronomically high bids. I mean, the winning bid was $5,800, but obviously if the winning bid was $5,800, the losing bid was like only $100 lower than that. So that means that there were 2 people who was willing to bid close to $6,000, including shipping, tax, fees, all this other nonsense that comes with eBay. You're looking at $6,000+ for this hilt. I mean, that's absolutely stunning. Okay, so I mean, obviously, I was completely blown away. I was floored by this, and so I felt that, man, that kind of changed. Kind of just rocked my collecting world. I thought that, after that result, I didn't think I would ever own this, period. Because I'm not spending $6,000 for this. That's ridiculous. So I thought, if that's going to be the new market, then it's over, right? I mean, it's not like the old market was that much better. I mean, the old market, we're looking at $3,500 complete in box from Germany. So I was like, okay. And so then I tried to explore some other avenues. And there was one guy on the rebelscum.com forums who had actually inquired about, pricing and comps, because he had an Obi-Wan Kenobi as first build. And I remember that. And so I just kind of reached out to him again. I kind of, exchanged a couple messages. But at the time, he really wasn't selling. So I reached out and, I said, what are we looking at here? And so we kind of went back and forth a little bit, and then we settled on 3,000. But that 3,000, has to come with the following, kind of caveat. So for him, he was one of those guys who didn't like the space, and so he actually sold it, got rid of it, and he placed it in another display case. Interestingly, he used a Obi-Wan Kenobi from Revenge of the Sith. And back then, I guess, they made 4,500 of those. And back then, I guess the value was so bad, because remember, these things weren't going for thousands 20 years ago. I think average was like, $300-$400, and sometimes you get even cheaper for, if you remember the Collector Society, you get it from secondary distributors. And so they made so many of those Obi-Wan Kenobis, Revenge of the Sith. I mean, he literally, I think, just spent a few $100, bought that for the case, and then he maybe sold the hilt separately and sold this. I mean, those are crazy days, man. Like a complete Obi-Wan Kenobi Revenge of the Sith with the worldwide edition plaque. And I did a review on this a couple weeks ago. I mean, you'll be lucky to get $1,500 for that. So it kind of mind-blowing that he actually, bought this thing and then just basically, essentially took it apart for parts. And so he didn't have the original brown shipper. He didn't have the original display case, none of that. He did have the plaque. He did have the certificate of authenticity. And, his Obi-Wan was, of course, in beautiful shape. And so we were very close to kind of like, finalizing the deal for that Obi-Wan Kenobi 3000, which is very expensive for a hilt that's not complete, that's missing quite a bit. I mean, it's missing the entire case and display, the entire base display case and packaging. But for me, the important thing was the paper. As I said before, the three things that are the most important. The actual lightsaber, the plaque, and the certificate of authenticity. He had all three of those. So we were about to close the deal on that, and then I get a message from my guy in the UK, and he told me that the deal had fallen through, which was just mind-blowing, because the person who paid was a very serious person. I mean, that person essentially paid off within minutes of winning the auction. And it fell through because a defect had been found in that lightsaber, and obviously when you pay $6,000, you don't want anything to be defective. And this was such a subtle defect that even though it was actually shown quite clearly on the eBay pictures, it was completely missed, both by the seller, by myself, by the buyer. Only when you had it in hand and did the really, really close inspection, as you would expect for a $6,000 collectible, was that defect found. And it's very interesting. Now I'll show it to you in close-up when I take this lightsaber off of the base. But the defect had to do with the bubble strip. And there's like this little tiny scratch, or maybe even it's a scratch or a crack through the plastic bubble strip. Fascinating, because, the seller was the original owner, I believe, and had treated this, absolutely with amazing respect. I mean, it had to basically sat in its display case, on his shelf for the better part of 20 years, never been dropped, never had an issue. What could have caused it? Normally, it takes impact, to cause a crack or that type of thing. But in any case, it fell through. And then a second chance offer was given to the next highest bidder, who let that lapse. And of course, the third highest bidder was myself. And so at that point, negotiations were reopened, an opportunity presented itself, and I had to make a decision. Now, the interesting thing is that when I saw the little tiny crack on the bubble strip, that reminded me of the other guy's lightsaber that I was already kind of very close to closing, because he had some pictures as well, obviously, and those pictures were gorgeous. He had some video, but on one of the pictures, I noticed something very similar. And when I blew up that picture, I noticed exact same type of scratch, crack on the bubble strip. And in fact, it wasn't just one of them, there were two of them. And I wasn't sure whether it was the lighting or not, so I asked him to check. He himself, of course, had never noticed this. Also a very, very high-end master replica Star Wars collector. 100% believe him when he treated his Obi-Wan, like a baby. I mean, after all, he bought an entire new display case just for that. He looked and had to confirm, yes, indeed, there's this line there, and likely a crack under the surface of the plastic. When you feel the plastic, by the way, it's completely smooth. So it's not like an actual through and through crack. There's just some sort of warping underneath the surface. So at that point, it was kind of an easy decision, because, for $3,000 and he didn't have the original packaging. And now on this end, I have the same damage, essentially. I mean, the bubble strip, the little tiny crack or scratch, or whatever you want to call it, the little defect. I mean, he has two of them, not quite as bad as this one, but this one is just one. But at the end of the day, it's essentially cracked plastic or defective plastic, either way you swing it. But the difference is this came with the absolute original packaging, all the brown shippers, all the paperwork, the display case. So I decided ultimately to go for this one. And, the final price was $2,500 out the door, shipped from the United Kingdom. which is a stunning, kind of swing, going from a lightsaber that, was actually confirmed by two different people, bids of close to $6K, now dropping $3,500 plus, to this. I think that the little tiny defect in the bubble strip is worth $3,500. Although obviously for some particular collectors, it's not worth that. But I jumped on that, and so that's the long story, the long saga of how I finally got Obi-Wan as first built by Obi-Wan when I thought I would never get it. This is the very same hilt that actually sold eBay.com, eBay.co.uk for 4,500 plus pounds. Conversion rate to US dollars is 5,800 and change. So I don't know. I mean, I hope you found that kind of fascinating. There's a lot more to delve into when we actually pick up this guy and take a look at it. So before we do that, I'm going to move this back. Let's take a look at the paperwork. So you can tell now that this is OG Master Replicas. Why? It's the beige envelope. No fold out, simple envelope that you can open up. And here you have, again, the typical Collector Society registration card. Is this the registration card or the Collector Society? It's a registration card. And then you have their limited warranty. And then, of course, the most important thing is the certificate of authenticity. You have the classic gold print on nice black cardboard stock. Opening it up, again, very, very nice gold stamp. Master Replicas, Mr. Vogel and Rothman. And then over here, the actual certificate of authenticity. Now, the one thing that I do notice is that they did not mention Obi-Wan specifically on this side, whereas for the Collector Society Elite editions, they do mention it by name, as they do with the signature editions. Here we have the picture of the Obi-Wan, and then you can see as first built by Obi-Wan. I'm going to scroll up very slowly so you can do the reading if you wish. I'd like to point out, in addition to the time-worn version seen in the film, Master Replicas has chosen to offer a limited edition pristine version of the lightsaber as it might have looked when Obi-Wan Kenobi first built it. This elegant weapon features handsome black, silver, and brass detailing. They talk a little bit more about where it comes from. So this is a little bit out of date. Since this was created, actually every part of the lightsaber now has been sourced. It took quite a bit of work, but the information is now out there. And I'll mention it in passing. I'll go into much more detail when I eventually get the weathered version. But yeah, the rear grip was from a kitchen faucet, essentially. The pommel, excuse me. And the various transistors, things like that, the flash gun, the TI-85 instruments. But yeah, all of that has been solved, let's just say. So there you go. Very, very nice. And then we're going to put this back. Actually, I do wonder if this was this his? Was he the original owner? I don't know, because the brown shipper that came was to a different address in the in the United States. So maybe this was one of the few that my source in the UK actually had to buy secondhand. I don't know. Again, this is a pretty rare piece. As with all of these old school, old style hilts, you can see that the silver plaque is affixed by double-sided tape to this kind of clear acrylic base, nice and thick. This is what comes with, Vader and Empire Strikes Back, Vader, New Hope Vader, all of that. So pretty good, nice shape. It's number 456 out of 500. You can see the logo and Obi-Wan Kenobi lightsaber. as first built by Obi-Wan. Okay, put that aside for now. And then finally, we have the actual lightsaber itself. So, are you ready to see this? Are you ready, guys, to see the $3,500 defect? All right, let's go. We'll put this aside, and then we're gonna gently take it up. This was a little bit dusty, to be fair, when I first got it, and I did my usual restoration, cleaned it up with my brilliant eyes, polished this bad boy nicely. And as you can see, when it's being polished, it just looks absolutely gorgeous. So where to start? So this pommel here indeed is from a faucet from the UK, I guess back in the 70s. This is mirror shine. You can see actually my face. You can see not the face, we can actually see the recording unit, the camera. Mirror polish, literally. 2003, man, 20 years, full 20 years, Master Replicas LLC. Here's the D-ring right over here. So this is from a faucet. And then this is kind of reminiscent of the T-track grips. But of course, this is actually plastic model here. These are the fins. And then the center part is from a flash gun, most likely. Here's the lever. And then this is the bubble strip. Again, very similar to the Luke Skywalker New Hope bubble strip, as well as the Vaders, you know, where these were taken from the TI-85 instruments. These are the transistors. Take a look here. Right here. And you can see the lines. This is the middle part, the control box, is very much similar to the flash gun from Luke and Vader's hilts. And then here, very often missed, you can see this little tiny, like solid metallic, like almost wire or grip on either side through the holes. Here's again the little lever. We'll move this around. You can see the little tiny nail here, whatever you call that. It's not a nail. It's like a little tiny, like, you know, screw, not a screw, but like a little bump, you know, the control box. And then this is from a grenade, World War II grenade, the ribbing over here. Look, this is the brass, this is the emitter, and you can see the very fine threading here. This is a thin neck. So this is Obi-Wan's lightsaber, and then you can see that Luke Skywalker paid homage to it when he built his in Return of the Jedi after, you know, losing the original one in the duel with Vader on Cloud City. And then we're gonna take a look here at the emitter right here. Very, very fascinating look. Here's the black hose, all metal. So there you have it. The emitter and this the neck area, the fins, these were actually, believe it or not, scraps taken from a jet engine being taken apart, and they would, you know, tear these, you know, engines from these scrap yards, and they would use them to make the, you know, the ships. But they didn't let any part go to waste, so they would take, you know, things that they thought looked interesting, and for Obi-Wan at least, those were little tiny scraps from actually, you know, like a jet engine. I think, yeah, a jet engine. Again, I'll go into more detail later for the Obi-Wan weathered version. If I go too much into it now, there'll be nothing to say after all, right? So again, there you have it. Just absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, truly shiny as new. So hopefully you can see this in all of its detail. There's the bubble strip right here. There's not many opportunities to see a Obi-Wan as first built on YouTube or anywhere, especially, you know, handled so closely so you can see every fine detail for those of you who are interested. get an idea for, again, how it looks. And of course, as with all of these lightsabers, way heavier than the seams. These are not toys. They're all basically really good, hefty chunks of metal. Feels really, really good to hold it in your hand. Okay, so those of you who are eagle-eyed, I'm sure have already seen the defect. It's right here. It's hard to really show on video. You have to take a picture really, but I'm sure you can see it's like this little tiny line right here. See that? So we're gonna go ultra close. Now remember, normally you don't appreciate a lightsaber. I'm bringing it within, no joke, like this is literally within, I think 2 or 3 inches of the actual lens of my iPhone. And to the point where it's starting to have a hard time focusing. So you can see that this is the little tiny crack right there. If you use your finger and just run it through, there's no crack at all. You can't feel it, okay? But that's what we're seeing right here. There's the plastic bubble strip, and if you look at it from this end here, you can see that, this is the metal on the side, and then this is the little bubble strip, and they basically, it's firmly in there, okay? But it is plastic, and you can move it a little bit. You can see it give a little, you can see it move a little bit. So there is that. From one angle here, you can much more clearly see it. But because it's a mirror polish, it's just really, really hard to appreciate, especially like, if you're like, doing this, okay, or holding it, it's just impossible. And again, this doesn't move. None of this like moves or is unstable or anything like that. It still feels like one piece, so there you have it. And the other guy, his had one actually right here. And then there was a secondary one, like a little bit fainter right here, okay? So, I mean, what is the mystery? I mean, if it just happened to one lightsaber, I would be like, okay, that's just bad luck, unfortunately. And I would maybe try to think about holding out and getting another one, and that's perfect, so to speak. But 2 lightsabers as first built, both with that little crack there, both by, high-end adult collectors who never ever subjected it to any trauma. There's just no answer for that. And I can only speculate, but my guess is that this is a process very similar to the rubber grips on the T-tracks, the rubber, kind of veneers, basically, essentially stripping off naturally. And it could just be that over 20 plus years, this plastic that they used to create this bubble strip, just for whatever reason, began to warp, maybe changing in size, and it just locked so tight in its positioning in this metal. We'll just turn it sideways. You can see it. You can see where it just locks right in, and there's no give at all, and it's so tight that maybe just through age, temperature, whatever you want to call it, it warped, and then internally it just basically under the surface cracked a little bit, and because it's translucent, you can see that cracking. A similar process happens to fine art porcelain, where the glaze over time, there's these like little cracks, these little a fine veneer of little cracks appears under the surface of the porcelain. It's in the glaze, and it is it's unpredictable, it's inevitable. A lot of it has to do with where the pottery is. I collect Walt Disney Classics collection statues, which is all fine porcelain. And maybe the humidity, the dryness, the temperature kind of determines whether this crazing, this little fine network of cracks underneath in the glaze happen or not. But sometimes, these pieces are in completely, well-preserved locations, and the cracks still appear. In pottery, this is so well recognized, by the way, that it's not even considered a defect, and it's just considered, like, again, part of the art of pottery, much like the patina or the patina, in certain bronzes. adds to the kind of the luster, kind of adds to the luster of the piece, to the value of the piece. It's just a simple reflection of antique aging. And so this might be something similar. Again, the rubber, the plastic, the crazing, which is over time. This is a 20-year-old, work of art, 20-year-old lightsaber, of which only 500 was made. It could be that these little cracks become very, very common. And obviously, it's not like these things are, these things, there's not that many of them out there. And so it's really, really hard to judge, hard to see. This might have happened way early, in the beginning, and it was just missed. You can see how easy it would be to miss. You're not particularly looking for it. Nobody's sticking their nose right up against it. This was before this thing was worth thousands of dollars. This could have happened at any time, during the ownership. So I would be interested to see if other Obi-Wan as first builds have similar issues with their bubble strip. Okay, it seems very likely to be so. There was one other guy on the Master Replicas Facebook page, who apparently was trying to sell one of these. He states that he sold it for $5,100 when I communicated with him, and then later on, it was found out that this was a scammer. He was a fake account. He's been scamming multiple collectors' Facebook groups, and so I can't really trust anything he says about this lightsaber. And most likely, he saw the auction go in the UK, and then took his opportunity to scam a few people. So, in any case, if there's any more of these out there, I would love to see. The guy who was auctioning his off a few years ago, I tried to look as careful as I could, but they're just, as you can imagine, a normal YouTube video just showing you the actual hilt. You're not going to be able to see enough detail to see if there's any deficiencies in the bubble strip. So there you have it. Now, what do you do about this? Well, I'm pretty happy with this, honestly, the way it is. I mean, I can definitely live with this little tiny crack. Other than that, this hilt is basically perfect. Just super stoked and super happy with this guy. Just holding this again in hand, so you can see what this looks like. It might be a little bit gimmicky. I mean, maybe when they made it, it was a little bit gimmicky. For sure, the one you really want to have is the Obi-Wan weathered version, but there's no doubt that this is absolutely gorgeous. There are people out there who could probably replace this. This is not so integral to the hilt that it can't be, that you can't do it. But how to do it would be pretty hard. I mean, you would have to work with the metal. You would need to somehow open the metal here, the bracket, and you have to somehow open it enough to then force this piece out and then put another piece that's exactly identical in. This, I cannot imagine, would be cheap. And I can imagine many people, I would trust like a collectible that's worth literally $3,000 and not have it ruined. It's a little bit tricky. This is also not going to come from like a TI-85. Obviously, Master Replicas didn't use those. They manufactured their own. And so you have to have one that looks essentially identical. So is that possible? I may explore it, but there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of ifs. I mean, the guy would have to be very reputable. He'd have to prove that he knows what he's doing. And I would have to basically, take the risk of shipping this heirloom, essentially, to him. Too many ifs, defect, just way too small for me to care. I'll send out feelers, but most likely, I'm just going to keep this as is. I'm super happy with it. It looks amazing, and I'm okay with it as far as that goes. So just putting this bad boy back into position. There you go. Let's put this here in position here. I think it's so funny because As First Built was released in 2003, and of course, in 2006, they released the Revenge of the Sith Obi-Wan Kenobi lightsaber, which, by the way, is actually literally the lightsaber that Obi-Wan took with him to Tatooine. And that's actually probably the screen accurate canon version of the as first built, right? And so it'll be interesting when I finally get the weathered. I might do another one of those, blowout comparisons where I will compare the Obi-Wan Revenge of the Sith hilt with the weathered and as first built. But I just thought that was amusing because it had this whole idea, this whole fantasy, like, what would Obi-Wan's weathered, worn lightsaber hilt look like, as first built? And then obviously later on, it's like, the people behind Revenge of the Sith, the production team, actually gave you the original canon lightsaber that he created as a Jedi Master, which, by the way, that looks like fire as well. I reviewed that a few weeks ago. I think they both look absolutely gorgeous. I will say that this right here, this along with the Return of the Jedi Elite Edition, hilt that I just released yesterday. I mean, those are the only two hilts from the original trilogy that I think can even be in the same conversation in terms of how gorgeous they look compared to the prequel trilogy lightsabers. I mean, the prequel trilogy lightsabers, man, they really went to town on those. Every one of those hilts just looks absolutely phenomenal. And so, the bling bling of the Elite Edition Jedi Luke and the as first built Obi-Wan Kenobi, they're kind of holding up the original trilogy's reputation. They're going to bat for the original trilogy right there. So anyways, that's about it. 42 minutes and plus. Again, this is probably, you can argue here or there, Luke version 2 signature edition, Luke Return of the Jedi Elite Edition, Darth Vader New Hope dual signature, and then this bad boy here, Obi-Wan as first built. These are kind of like the charter members now, of the $3,000 club. Sometimes they might fall out a little bit. Other times, like with this, go way above. But they're pretty consistent. 3K. Forgot one more. There's 5 total. Mace Windu, right? Mace Windu. Those are the 5 big ones out of the 25 total. Top 5, 3K club. Again, just over the moon happy to actually be able to own this when I thought that was forever beyond my reach. And so I hope you enjoyed kind of like the saga and the story behind these hilts. Put this bad boy in position. Have a couple more coming, but we're slowing down. But yeah, this is really, really big. After this, the only really, not as big ticket as this, but the only, I think, higher ticket item is the Anakin Attack of the Clones signature edition. That's left, for me at least. I have every other big one. So there you go. Give this the time that it deserves as one of, again, the charter members of the 3K Club. Until next time, guys, I hope you enjoy this. Do take care.